Now, with all of this having been said, we move on to the happy ending, which is what can you do about it? Thankfully, you can do a lot about it. Let's start with the pharmacological approach, and then we'll move into the nutritional approach, which you can already guess where that's going to go. The pharmacological approaches include very common drugs like allopurinol. Allopurinol is the most common, and it will effectively reduce uric acid. In so doing, it will improve gout, as is expected, and that's usually what people are looking for. They want resolution of their gout, that being the most commonly acknowledged consequence of high uric acid. But there are metabolic effects as well that are beneficial. So a study by Madero et al., 2015, Madero et al., they published a clinical trial. So this is good. That's the highest quality of interventional research. And they looked at overweight and pre-hypertensive subjects. So these are men and women. And they put them on allopurinol. And they found that the allopurinol not only resulted in uric acid reductions, but also a significant improvement in metabolic health. Now, a confounding variable, including weight loss and improvements in insulin sensitivity. So all very, very good things. One challenge, though, is that I have been unable to find a study that did this in the absence of any other intervention. So this study by Madero et al., 2015, they gave the people allopurinol and looked at these metabolic outcomes, but they also had a low fructose diet. So based on what I just said, you can see how that's a bit of a confounding variable. Even still, generally, certainly in clinical practice, from what I've gathered from clinical teams, allopurinol will often result in some degree of weight loss and general improvements in metabolic markers that are connected to insulin resistance. Now, however, before you just jump into taking allopurinol, every drug has side effects that you don't want. And so I just feel inclined to mention them just to curb your enthusiasm for this drug, lest you ask for a prescription from your clinician a little too readily. There can be some significant skin reactions, like an exfoliative dermatitis, as well as some even more serious skin problems. There is the common GI issues like diarrhea and nausea, and even some liver and kidney problems as well. So it is a drug to be careful with, like all drugs are, even though it does have some metabolic benefits because of the lowering of uric acid. Now, let's move into allulose, as I mentioned at the beginning. Allulose is a rare sugar, and it really has emerged as a pretty promising agent to improve uric acid, to reduce uric acid. And that might be one of the mechanisms whereby allulose has been shown so extensively in humans and rodents to improve metabolic outcomes. Now, just as a disclosure, I am finishing an allulose study now. We're just about to submit this for publication in animals, and we're doing a human study soon. But the effects were substantial. And these are unpublished results that I'll mention, so I need to describe them cautiously, or just with some, you need to hear them cautiously because they've not gone through a peer review process. But among the groups we had was one group of animals on a Western diet, so high fat, high sugar, and unexpectedly they gained a lot of weight. If we gave them allulose in their drinking water, they gained substantially less weight, less than half of what the other animals ate, and they ate less. They just were not as hungry. They had much better satiety. So allulose is important. It matters. And uric acid could be one of the key changes that's helping the metabolic health of the animal. Now, how does this happen? It could be twofold. One with regards to absorption, and the other with regards to excretion of uric acid. Now, let me also say, I regularly get my blood tested through a company called Blokes. And I encourage you to look them up. I really am a fan of their service. My uric acid levels have always been in the normal range. However, when I, as just a matter of experiment, started taking much more of the RX sugar products of the allulose, my uric acid levels went below the normal range, and nothing really changed, but they went down so much that it got below the normal range. I don't think that's a problem. I've continued to feel fine, but I've seen this happen in many other people as well, who, despite changing their diet and becoming healthier, they still have persistently high uric acid levels, and it just concerns them. They start taking allulose and it drops very, very quickly. So now I appreciate what I'm saying. These are unpublished results. So please appreciate that. I want you to appreciate that as a scientist. What I'm citing to you or sharing with you is anecdotal, my own and those I've seen of others. But I have seen enough that I am inclined to mention it, even though I would rather just be citing a peer-reviewed study. Until we have some peer-reviewed studies, I'm happy to mention the anecdote. Now, how can it work? All right, the first thing I mentioned was the uric acid. Interestingly, allulose is the good twin to fructose. Now, and a lot of people nowadays are trying to say fructose is good and you should eat a lot of it. I'm not trying to suggest that fructose is uniformly bad, but I do think we eat it in a way that we never did before. Honey would have been a very uncommon occurrence, and we would have had to fight off bees in order to run away from it. So it's something we as humans would have enjoyed infrequently. And moreover, the fruit that we would have had ancestrally would have not only would not have been drinking it, we would have been eating it, but also would have had very, very low levels of fructose. Just as a case in point, do yourself a favor as an educational tool and look up the change in apples over the past 100 years. What was once these small, bitter, sour little things have become these big, fat, juicy, and delicious fructose sugar bombs. So we eat a lot of fructose. Now, back to allulose. Allulose is a twin. It has one singular alteration in one of the carbons, but compared to fructose, but it is otherwise identical to fructose, but it is different enough that it can't get metabolized. But it still can compete with those same absorption pathways. So the same doorway that lets fructose come in can let allulose come in. And so that we believe is most especially relevant at the gut. That if you have competition for the uptake of any fructose, allulose is fighting now. What used to be an uncompeted entrance for fructose to just come right into the gut now has to fight. And with the allulose, if you're taking an allulose, so it stands to reason that less fructose is getting absorbed. That means less has to get metabolized. Now, let's say that there is fructose that has been absorbed and it is getting metabolized. That now we look at the back end of it, where uric acid, if there's more allulose, this is theoretical, this hasn't been published, but we're hoping to confirm this in our upcoming human study. When allulose gets consumed, it's because we don't burn it as an energy source, its main exit is through the urine. And there's this idea that Dr. Rick Johnson at University of Colorado, the global expert on fructose and uric acid metabolism, he has posited this idea that the allulose could be increasing this pull effect on the uric acid, enhancing the kidney's ability to remove the uric acid from the blood and dumping it into the urine.